Please join me in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Please join me as I pray. Again, Father, we're thankful for the blessings of this new day that you've given us for the season of the year when everything is coming to life and the weather is cool and the trees are blooming and the birds are out singing. And Father, we're really blessed to live in this great county and this great state and this great country. But sometimes too, as we conduct the business of our governments, we're so torn between purpose and doubt. And a lot of times we build windows to let in the sunshine and then we hang blinds to shut it out. So Lord, as we move forward through the agenda today, we pray that you will direct the steps of these commissioners, that they will listen to your voice and that the decisions they make will benefit all the citizens of this great county. For it's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Roll call.
Precinct 1, Commissioner Cheney.
Here.
Precinct 2, Commissioner Castellon.
Here.
Precinct 3, Commissioner Russo.
Here.
Precinct 4, Commissioner Lovell.
Here.
Here. We do have a quorum and citizens to be heard. I have 3 different people here that want to talk about natural disaster emergency information. Ms. Meyer, do you want to speak now or when? Right now, is it be the time?
Sure.
Come on up then. Oh, I didn't see you out there. I'm sorry.
Ms. Meyer brought something that she'd like for me to read, just kind of as a preface to this. And this is just as a request from her. This is Aransas County Emergency Planning and Procedures. Dear Commissioner Cheney, this letter comes from Aransas County Democratic Party whose members reside in Aransas County and who have a vested interest in local emergency planning and procedures. The people of Aransas County have suffered through severe and traumatic weather occurrences the last few years, including hurricanes, extreme weather that is unusual for the Texas coast. These events result in the loss of electric power and potable water. While most residents can prepare for a few days without power or water, it is much more challenging to endure a week or more without power and water. The question becomes, what emergency plans and procedures does Aransas County have in place for traumatic weather events, especially respecting emergency shelters? Recent events show that Aransas County follows a reactive rather than a proactive emergency plan, if at all, and relies heavily on the outside sources for emergency assistance. For example, during the February winter storm, Fulton Community Church was the first to open its facilities to warm shelter, food, and water without anyone needing help. No question were asked. The Fulton Volunteer Fire Department subsequently opened its doors to anyone in need of help. We understand that the Rockport Volunteer Fire Department did not open an emergency shelter because the generator did not work and needs to be replaced. More importantly, at no time did Aransas County open the new convention center for emergency services. In comparison, Nueces County government leaders immediately responded and opened warming and overnight emergency shelters all over the city of Corpus Christi and worked with the local shelters to make sure that no person was literally left out in the cold. While it is easy for Aransas County Commissioners Court to enjoy the benefits of warm weather, tourism, and vibrant economy, it is much more important for the court to be responsible to its constituents during bad times. Well thought out emergency plans with detailed procedures is critically important, especially respecting emergency shelters, food, and water. Second, Does Aransas County have an emergency contact registration program that calls the elderly and the disabled during weather emergencies to determine whether assistance is needed? More importantly, what is the county's evacuation plan? And does it have the means to transport the elderly and disabled in the event of an emergency? If not, then why not? Third, does Aransas County have an emergency task force that is regularly meets to prepare for emergency events? This task force can design an emergency shelter, food, water plan, and create an emergency contact registration program, and can work with local food vendors like HEB and Walmart to prevent a run on the stores during weather or other emergencies to ensure a steady supply of food and water. Emergency services should never take a backseat to other governmental expenditures. If it is a matter of creating a new budget line item or creating a new tax source, then so be it. There may be state or federal grants, programs available to jump in as an emergency relief plan. The health and safety of Aransas County residents should be first and foremost in the responsibilities of the Commissioner's Court. Thank you, Commissioner Cheney, for bringing these matters to the attention of the court. Sincerely, Pamela Myers, Aransas County Democratic Party.
Thank you, Commissioner Cheney.
I called Commissioner Cheney immediately prior to Uri and then many times throughout Uri. I called about, do we have emergency shelter and where could people go? Because I knew many people wouldn't be ready. I'm from Alaska. So we went under our house and cut all our pipes and put drain lines in so we could drain all our pipes. And we put heat on our well just because we knew how to be prepared. Throughout calling Jack, and then afterwards, he asked me to write him a letter and then come before you with different representatives. So I contacted my friend, Anna Robertson, and she wrote a very long, detailed letter on her plan. And her plan is she's addressing this to the mayor, the council, chamber, sheriff's department, police department, fire department, school superintendents, nursing home administrators, RV resort owners, churches, and government leaders. The citizens of Rockport and Aransas County have a deep concern with all departments and require an extensive, comprehensive emergency plan to be put in place for the citizens of our county and publicized for viewing and approval. We propose that you have a committee in place with one person appointed as a director of the emergency plan and 2 members of each department listed above and 4 persons from the community. Items required on the plan Items required on the plan are based on the following disasters that have recently happened in our community with little planning, or at the very least, poor planning with no implementation of the good old-fashioned fire drills to see that everything is in working condition and up to date. The citizens require notification, Amber Alert type information on signage set up at each red light in Aransas County, directing people to shelters or evacuation for their own in any disaster in case phone lines are down. The emergency phone system to all registered persons on the website for directions that is in place now. Maybe the church bells actually starting to ring to announce an evacuation 10 minutes to 3 hours ahead of the evacuation. Shelters. We need shelters for the disabled, elderly, and homeless. Either a new building away from the coastline that will accommodate those in need with bedding, generators, gym-style bathrooms with showers, full kitchens, large freezers, and ice boxes. Ask Castaways for equipment such as cots, medical beds, wheelchairs, crutches, the public donations to Castaways and Goodwill, so it would be a good blessing that they donate these items in advance for an emergency shelter. An area designated by medical personnel for those people who have medical supplies that need refrigeration, such as insulin, and an RN nurse from nursing homes could be present to administer drugs to residents. There must be an emergency gas and diesel at this site for police and other personnel for transportation. Basics, we need water and food, either through the private sector or through FEMA. prior to our disasters. We should have at least 1 week of food and supplies. Transportation. Get HEB, Walmart, large parking areas designated as an assembly area for the elder and schedule times for departures to facilities or shelters. Kiosks and computers set up. This is a really long letter, but in general, she's asking the same thing that I asked in that letter. I have another letter from Holly Francis. Holly Francis says, my name is Holly Francis. I bought a house in Rockport and moved here in 2016. I was blessed that my house and I survived Hurricane Harvey. FEMA was a big part of my survival, reimbursing me for the money I spent for gas, hotel, and food during the evacuation time. I do not understand why Aransas County is against FEMA coming in and providing our county with much needed shelter for our citizens during a natural disaster. I understand that Refugio and Nueces have FEMA domes for shelters, and Aransas has turned them down. Commissioner Pat Rousseau made it clear at the City Council candidate forum that she and others do not support FEMA domes due to it not being allowed for mixed use. The idea that it should be used as a storage facility is ludicrous in the first place. Should a fire, tornado, or hurricane hit our county, all the citizens need immediately shelter, supposed to just waiting outside while we move whatever was stored there. There was a recent brush fire that consumed 2 structures and a vehicle. No warnings were issued to move out of the area. Had the fire gotten further out of control, where would residents go? Is this really how you want to treat your citizens, especially the elderly and disabled? FEMA shelters are a definite need here to protect citizens you represent. What other plans do you have? Use the multi-purpose $1 million courthouse for a shelter? I urge you to please consider the valuable resources from FEMA or come up with a better plan that protects the vulnerable, disabled, elderly from disasters that come our way. This one is from Hector Rodriguez. The February winter storm was challenging for all of us, but especially for those who needed assistance and had no place to go. This raises the issue of Aransas County's emergency planning program, if any. The RV resort that I call home quickly lost power and water. Fortunately, I had a friend with a new house that invited me and my dog to stay with her during the storm. My friend's house maintained steady electrical power and periodically lost water from the city of Rockport. My friend and I, however, had prepared with plenty of food and water. As I waited for Aransas County to open the convention center as an emergency shelter for those who needed one, Fulton Community Church and the Fulton Volunteer Fire Department quickly opened their doors to anyone needing help. I do not believe the convention center ever became available for shelter. My question is, does Aransas County have any emergency planning committee that discusses and plans for emergency weather conditions? If so, who is on this committee and when and where does it meet? If not, why not? While Aransas County could not control the state's electrical grid, it could have adapted a lack of potable water and made sufficient preparations. It was almost a week into the storm that Portland graciously provided 5 gallons of drinking water to residents of Aransas County. HEB and Walmart worked furiously to maintain their shelves despite their supply trucks having trouble navigating ice-covered roads. Their employees are to be congratulated for the job well done. What, if anything, did Aransas County do to help these stores with their difficult task?
Ms. Meyer, your 15 minutes is up, and I've got 2 other people want to talk about the same.
Okay, thanks. Who do I give this?
5 minutes? I'm sorry, your 5 minutes was up a long time ago. Ms. Medina?
Yeah. Do that too.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. 5 minutes, ma'am, I'm sorry.
All right, I just have sort of the same questions for you. Good morning. First of all, my name is Nicole Medina. As an Aransas County resident for the past 37 years and a homeowner in this town, I just have some, questions about the crisis plans for safety and security and the well-being provided to the citizens of this county during a natural disaster. My first question is, why do we not have a permanent county shelter for the people of Aransas County to be able to go to in case of emergencies such as Hurricane Harvey, Hannah, or the lack of power and water from the recent unprecedented freeze that we had?
Along with needing a county shelter, we would also need the county to call or have a permanent helpline for help during natural disasters, like a phone line, not 911, because we could save that for emergencies, you know, instead of someone calling 911 just because they need a ride to the shelter. That should also be able to provide them assistance to help move those with disabilities, the homeless, single people with families, or just families in general that have no vehicles or no way to get to the shelter without help. I would also like to know the plan that is in place as of now for emergency food and water supplies for Aransas County during these events. We cannot continue to rely on outside help. For example, we just experienced a statewide catastrophe, as Ms. Mara just spoke about. I feel if we had our own backup supply for our county, that we could at least provide for our citizens when or if something like this were to happen again. Do we have a backup for this from anyone, maybe through private means such as HEB, Walmart? Is there any federal, state, county, or city agencies willing to help us prepare for situations as this? Where are our emergency plans located for citizens to be able to view so they can also be prepared? Also, how and when are they activated, and who is in charge of making those decisions? Those are just a few of the questions that I had for y'all this morning. Many of the Aransas County citizens are still almost 4 years later recovering from the aftermath of Harvey. And then the Texas freeze came and it was almost like deja vu, but it was just cold this time. And then we had no help from outside because our whole state suffered. The good news is that vaccines are finally becoming more available and our citizens are getting vaccinated. So that is a blessing, as hurricane season is predicted to come earlier this year than we usually expect it. And if we need to be in shelters, at least COVID would be one less thing to worry about. I understand other places like Refugio and Nueces County have FEMA domes for emergency shelters. Maybe this could possibly be a consideration for Aransas County as well. I appreciate your time and I look forward to hearing about the future safety plans and guidelines that Aransas County will put in place in order to keep its citizens safe.
Thank you, Ms. Medina. Ms. Moore?
Hello, guys. I'm Jane Moore, resident of Aransas County, and Pat Rousseau has a formal letter from me. But I wanted to bring your attention to two longtime residents, Ed Bellion and Gail Hancock. Gail herself is a 20-year-old resident homeowner. She's 80 plus years old. Why do we not have a county shelter where citizens could assemble in emergencies? Along with needing a county shelter, we need to know the county will contact us in person, and help move folks to the shelter if they're disabled, handicapped, homeless, or just elderly. What is the plan for emergency water and food supplies through private means? What are our emergency plans? How and when are they activated, and who is in charge? That has become a kind of a reigning idea over all of these letters, is that I don't think the citizens are aware of any kind of organization here in the county that could plan for disasters. We just don't know. Most counties do have them. Ed Bellion here, he says over the recent years, there's been several natural disasters, including the Valentine's 2021 Valentine's freeze up. And aside from the physical damage, he says that there was also concomitant damage and effects on people of the loss of electrical power for days at a time. And unlike in the warm months, this loss in cold weather situations can be deadly. And of course, it is a proven fact that way over 50 people died in Texas directly because of the cold. There's people in town here that live absolutely alone. Absolutely. Maybe they want to die. I'm not sure, but I doubt it. And they don't have people in place, a support group that can come in, relatives, etc. So that's what we are asking about. What kind of emergency plans are in place here in Aransas County? And appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Do you want me to read? I received this letter this morning from Miss Jane Moore. Dear Commissioner Pat Rousseau As I awoke near dawn the morning of Monday, February 15th, I was cold and noticed the electricity was going on and off. That was the rolling blackouts that they said might come with this winter storm. Soon the electricity went completely out and did not return for 80 hours. This was not good for an all-electric mobile home. As I was packing to camp out at my sister's since she had natural gas for her oven, I started wondering about my own appreciation to even have an option. What if I didn't have options? What were people going to do? How long will this last? Clearly, by the next day, things had grown worse. I looked every time I could. Some sort of emergency declaration must be happening, but it wasn't. No one in the region seemed to be doing anything. Why weren't there any emergency locations where families and others could ride this out? If people did not have the means, how are they going to stay warm and cook food? What about drinking water? To my chagrin, I found nothing. Finally, the Corpus Christi people started announcing news about locations that folks might be able to land safely. At this point, at least a dozen people had died in Texas directly from the cold. Where were the people of Aransas County going to find help? I know a county commissioner was helpful in the end to persuade a few churches and both fire departments to provide warming station setups, but this was not an automatic response as it should have been. I've come to understand that water was finally brought to the region after citizens' requests. This was almost a week after the freeze. Whose duty was it to notice this? It's unclear that anyone is assisting the county with emergency management. Please explain the existing structure and why it was non-existing during this most recent emergency. Thanks so much for your time this morning, Jane Moore.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Brissette on a different subject.
I have no comments at this time.
Okay. All right, that closes the citizens to be heard. I appreciate it. Under presentation, we have recognition and present proclamation P04-2021 to Jennifer Hurd for her dedication and contribution to Aransas County and its community. Tracy, come on up and read the proclamation. Before you do that, I just want to say that we have a lot of good employees in Aransas County that have helped a lot of people, but she does this. This was not her job description. She did this on her own time. That's why we're trying to recognize her. Go ahead.
Okay, Proclamation P04-2021, recognizing Aransas County employee Jennifer Hurd for her public services. Whereas public employees and volunteers make great contributions to their communities by serving in areas such as health, education, community development, utilities, housing, crime prevention, fire protection, and environmental protection. Whereas the public employees of Aransas County are committed to exhibiting the highest standards of excellence, dedication, creativity, efficiency, and professionalism. Whereas in just the past few months, Aransas County employee Jennifer Hurd worked diligently on her own time and coordinated with a local business and volunteer organization to arrange the replacement of a stolen travel trailer for a family of 4, including a child with disabilities, thereby saving that family from homelessness. Whereas during that same time period, Jennifer Hurd once again worked diligently on her own time and coordinated with another public entity, local business and volunteer organization to arrange the purchase of a travel trailer for an elderly veteran of Aransas County whose home had recently burned to the ground. And whereas today we recognize Jennifer Hurd for her hard work and dedication to ensure the welfare and safety of our residents. Now, therefore, let it be known that on this 22nd day of March, 2021, the Aransas County Commissioners Court does hereby recognize and appreciate Jennifer Hurd for her hard work and unwavering dedication to public service and continually assisting the residents of Aransas County.
Thank you very much for your dedication to the people of Aransas County and Fisher County. Thank you. We'll get this to you.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you.
Okay, and we got a presentation from Mike McDonald. I'm not going to explain it all. Come on up. about circulation in Little Bay. We're going to try to get it fixed. Go ahead.
Yep. Good morning, Judge and Commissioners. Glad to be here. I've got my colleague, Luis
Who are
Marastani.
you?
I'm sorry.
Who are you?
My name is Aaron Horine with Mont McDonald. And I've got my colleague, Luis Marastani. He had a scheduling conflict, so he was not able to be here in person, but he's a project manager and the task lead for everything going on with Little Bay. So he's going to give the presentation. And really what we're doing here is we've been coordinating with the county and the navigation district and the city of Rockport on the progress of this project, you know, all the upfront data collection, setting up our numerical models. But now this is the first chance where we've got a lot of good material to present in a public setting here. So with that, I'll turn it over to Luis, who is now going to start the presentation.
All right, Luis.
All right. Yeah, good morning. Thanks for the intro, Aaron. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes. Yes.
Perfect. Perfect. So yeah, like Aaron mentioned, we're here to talk about Little Bay and how we can improve the issues that we saw from Hurricane Harvey. So let me. Okay. So just a quick agenda. We're going to go over the FEMA requirements, and that I'll talk a little bit about kind of what brought this project about. We're going to talk about historical site conditions that I'm going to go very briefly into our analysis and the preliminary alternatives that we're testing at the moment and the results of that analysis so far. And then finally, I'm going to go into conclusions and next steps. Since this is in progress, I'm just going to talk about what happens after this meeting. So moving on, just to kind of show everybody. So Little Bay, we're all pretty familiar. It's that Little Bay that's enclosed by the Rockport Beach and Key Allegro. And what we saw is after Harvey, there was a lot of damage, especially at the inlet and outlet to Little Bay. So you know, the county was able to secure a grant through FEMA to basically evaluate the problem with Little Bay and to develop a solution to solve the problem and increase the resilience of that area. So the goal of the project is to mitigate flood and storm surge damage in Little Bay from extreme storms like Harvey. We do that by improving the hydraulic conveyance of water from Little Bay to Aransas, how quickly Little Bay can drain into Aransas Bay. And just one big caveat on that, you know, FEMA has told us that they do not allow any dredging, which means any changing of the bathymetry within Little Bay, you know, removing any sediments. So for this project, what we do is we've developed a combined hydraulics and circulation model, which I'll talk about that. And when we mean hydraulic, we're talking rainfall and circulation as tides. We're going to propose potential alternatives, evaluate them. That's going to be that's what's ongoing now, and that's going to be a fairly thorough process because we have a lot of stakeholders here that have a say in kind of what alternative goes in there. So we have to run that through the county, the navigation district, and get the public buy-in as well. And then finally, we'll recommend our alternative based on those discussions, and obviously based on the performance. The most important part is whatever we do, we want to make sure it works and we get the best value. And then once that moves forward, then we'll get into the final design and permitting, which will be the next step after the alternative has been selected. So before I get into the analysis, I just want to talk about really briefly about the history of Little Bay. And I think, you know, these two aerials side by side are a very good representation of and kind of help us understand the issues that we're seeing today. So Little Bay originally was a peninsula, you know, and fairly marshy area. You can see there was where Leggett Channel is now, which this is Leggett Channel. You can see there was a narrow channel, but then you had a big wide open kind of shallow sand flat to the south. And then you had a small remnant channel, you know, looking like Blevins Channel. And back then, you didn't see any issues. You had a big open area where, you know, any rainfall that would come in from the upland and drain out, it would drain out into Little Bay and basically be in Aransas Bay. Nowadays, we have, you know, development progresses over time. So, you know, since this aerial, Keel Egg Road was constructed, and then the Rockport Beach was also built. And that effectively closed off Little Bay. And, you know, rather than having 3 and 1 very large area for water to come in and out of the bay, you have just 2 narrow channels, especially at Blevins, you have a very narrow channel, and then Leggett, slightly wider channel. For all the water that would come in or out of Little Bay, it has to go through those 2 channels. So just to put that in perspective, so you can see again where Rockport Beach is now, you have that big open area, and then Blevins, you know, you have fairly similar narrow channels there. So what did we do as part of our analysis? So the first thing is, because this, the problem is, you know, we need to understand what the source of the problem is. So we developed a very comprehensive numerical model, probably the most comprehensive model of Little Bay to date, that at least that I'm aware of. And we found that there's 2 main issues when it comes to Harvey, especially, and big storms. And it's, you have storm surge that comes in from the bay, and then you have the rainfall. And what you can see here on this graphic that's looping, this is what we call a Heckgrass model. So this is a rainfall model, where basically we're replicating Harvey in this case. We're dropping rain onto the watershed. We have the natural elevations, and that water follows its natural pathways as it does in reality to get into Little Bay. But you know, this model is very good for rainfall, for not great for circulation. So we actually take the results from this model and couple it with Mike, which is a very good coastal model, to give us a really good idea of what's happening when the storm surge comes in, and what happens with the velocities, which I'll talk about that in a second. So like I said, we tested just the initial conditions. We looked at Harvey, we looked at the 100-year case, and we looked at a lot of different cases to find out, okay, what's the driving factor behind the problem? We know that the inlets after Harvey were damaged. You had damage to infrastructure. You had a lot of issues with Little Bay. So what we found from our modeling is, in terms of velocity, which is the most damaging aspect of a storm for Little Bay, velocity being, as you can see in this video when it runs through, you'll see those high, those blue red colors, those are those high velocities through the channels. We found that rainfall is a primary factor for that. And that's because that would make sense, because you have a constricted channel, and you know, most of the volume of water is coming in from the upland. Now that's natural, because you have the natural topography, the elevation, that water naturally falls in there, and it has for years. Well, you get these big storm events where it basically gets into Little Bay, and the only way out is Leggett and Blevins channel. So they're constricting drainage, you get high velocities. We also found, we looked at flooding to see how this affects, you know, if there's any effect to flooding because of that constriction. And what we found is that the driving mechanism, at least for upland flooding, is the rainfall, which means that we're not getting a backup in a sense of the drainage. The water gets into Little Bay. There's enough room in Little Bay to accept the water, but then once it's in Little Bay, it's kind of it's stuck there until it can drain out during the event at those high velocities. So so then what do we do? So then we look at alternatives. Basically, to put it in simple terms, what we need to do to solve the problem with the velocities and the drainage is fairly simple. You got to put more, you got to open up Little Bay. You got to let it breathe, let that water be able to come out, so that it drains out in an easier, and you have a lower velocity. So I'm going to show just initial alternatives that we looked at that, you know, aim to achieve that that end. And I note just before I get into these are very preliminary. We're still testing them. So these are concepts and they're not set in stone. So we're still deciding on what the best option is, but this is going to show us generally what the direction we're going through. So the first one we looked at was deepening. So of Leggett channel, which means, you know, you want to increase the flow out of the amount of water that can go out of the channel. You increase the cross-sectional area of the channel by adding as much depth as possible. But we found that this option is very limited because you're limited by infrastructure on either side. You have bulkheads, so you can't deepen this 40 feet. You can only go down 9 feet before you start undermining bulkheads and affecting infrastructure. The next option we looked at was a more kind of extreme case where we widen Leggett and we double the width. And basically we looked at that specific width of going from 40 to 80 feet. That's based on, okay, what's the maximum width we could do without, you know, starting to affect the adjacent parking lots and all of that. So that's the next option we looked at. And then another option we looked at was, okay, let's open up through Key Allegra. Let's add some culverts. And the locations you can see on the right here of the 5 culverts we looked at, these locations are based on, okay, what are the possible locations where we could put these culverts without interfering with any private homes, private property. So these bulkheads right here, right up along Bayshore Drive, would be the option. And again, the goal is to get more openings in Little Bay to drive flow out. This was also to look at get more circulation into these canals, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then finally, another option is a new inlet. So adding in a new inlet on the southwest side of Little Bay, just next to Rockport Beach. And what's shown right now, like I said, we haven't refined anything. So at this moment, we're just looking at what's the largest possible inlet we could do without, you know, impacting Rockport Beach or severely impacting adjacent infrastructure again. So we looked at a 55-foot wide channel coming in along that entrance to Rockport Beach to connect the ski basin to Aransas Bay, give us a new area for water to come in and out of Little Bay. So what do we know so far of these alternatives? So then we tested them through our models and we looked at the first aspect of it, which is, all right, what do we do about velocity? So just kind of going back, what you're seeing here is a snapshot of that video that I showed earlier of velocity. And we know we have very high velocities in Leggett and Blevins channel. So much so at Harvey, we saw the undermining of the Key Allegra Bridge, damage to sheet pile, and Leggett, we saw damage to those sheet piles. And we saw that overall circulation during the bay, even during storm events, is very low, which is it's not good from an environmental standpoint, which means you have a stagnant area within Little Bay, and then you have just these 2 inlets that are trying to drive water out. And you can see even during these storms, you have no velocities in the channels. So then we looked at the widened case. So we widened Leggett channel by 100 feet. And we saw a pretty substantial velocity reduction in velocity between 1 to 3.5 feet per second, which is very good. And it also reduced the velocity in Blevins channel by 1 to 2.5 feet per second, which is fairly substantial for this case. And then we looked at all the other options. So I talked about the culverts, the deepened channel, the widened, and the new inlet. And what we found in terms of velocities is that the widened is the largest one. It has the largest reduction in velocities at the bridge, at Blevins, and at Leggett. So these are the different data points. We saw obviously the largest reduction was at Leggett itself because that's where the alternative was taking place. But we also saw the new inlet did a pretty good job. We're still reducing almost 40% at Blevins and had a good reduction there. So in terms of velocity, all this tells us right now we're on the right track. And kind of the next step for this would be, which we'll talk about later, but would be, you know, maybe we can combine these and get even more benefit out of it. Maybe it's worth it. So then we looked at hydraulic conveyance, which that means, you know, how well are we draining Little Bay? How much flow do we get out of Little Bay? And this is a tricky metric to look at because there's different ways to look at it, and at different locations, you're changing things different ways. So for example, this plot, we're looking at the percent change in Leggett channel. So in Leggett channel, how do we change the flow rate? So the culverts reduce the flow rate in Leggett channel by 15%, almost 15%, which would that's a good thing because it means that you're diverting flow that would normally be going out of Leggett. Now it's going out those culverts. And then the alternatives that change the geometry of Leggett, such as the deepening and the widening, increase the flow out of Leggett, which means more water is going through Leggett as well. So that's how, you know, we tie this back into velocity for the comparisons. And then finally, the new inlet, as expected, it does reduce the discharge out of Leggett, but not as substantially as the other options. And then we do the same thing for Blevins channel. And for Blevins channel, which we would expect a reduction in discharge for all these alternatives, which is what we're trying to do, because we're diverting flow that would normally go out of Blevins and bringing it to these other new openings into Little Bay. And you may ask, you know, why haven't we done anything at Blevins? We have the TxDOT will be building a new bridge there that's going to widen that area, and that's being tested in the model. But we're also leaving Blevins the way it is because if you recall from the previous aerial, you know, it's more of the natural. That area has always been a smaller channel, and it's also because we have a lot of infrastructure there in the way, which would make it too challenging to try and widen anything there. We'd start getting into people's properties, which we don't want to do that. Then we looked at general circulation, and what that means is we're looking at the day-to-day flow conditions in Little Bay, and the purpose for our project to look at is to make sure that our alternatives do not negatively impact circulation, meaning we don't want to make conditions in Little Bay worse, and we want to look at if we can improve the problem from storm conditions, but also improve the circulation problem in Little Bay, then that's something that we would, you know, consider in the benefit of the alternative. So what did we do? What you're going to see here on the right, it's essentially a dilution model where we put in a constituent at 100% concentration. This is just an artificial, think of it like a dye or a neutrally buoyant particle. And that's what you're seeing in red. And then we measure how long it takes to dilute. So what you're seeing happening here is just normal tides. And you see that constituent as it gets pulled out and fresh water from Aransas Bay comes in, the color changes as that concentration reduces. And this helps us, you know, quantify like what's the deficiency in tidal exchange, and you know, where are the worst areas. And then we can look at how all our alternatives change that situation. You see over time, it takes quite a while, but you can see here, there's pretty good connection between Blevins and Leggett. So at least around this area in the center of Little Bay, you have a pretty quick dilution, but then you see over time, a lot of that gets trapped in the ski basin, and you also see a lot of it getting trapped in the canals because there's just not enough flow driving into the canals. And then the same thing up here in Canoe Lake or the Harbor Oaks area, you just see that concentration stays red for quite a long time. Now, keep in mind, this is a worst case scenario. We're not running any drainage or any flow into outfalls into this area that would change that. So this is worst case in terms of dilution. And what you're seeing this run, we're running this for a period of 41 days. So we could run this model indefinitely, and eventually you'd see everything get diluted. But the purpose for us is just for a comparison. We think at 41 days cutoff, I mean, that's pretty substantial amount of time for any particle to remain within little b. So let me see here. So next slide. So then we do the comparison of the, this was the best case in terms of circulation, the new inlet. And what we found before, as we said, we saw that a lot of that concentration gets trapped in the ski basin on the south side of it. When we put in that new inlet, we're helping to drive flow, and it actually creates circulation between this connection here and the new inlet, which helps to pull those constituents out and helps pretty substantially reduce the concentrations. But again, you see in the canals, not much of a change, and not much of a change up here in the Harbor Oaks Canoe Lake area. So just to put it in a way that's a little bit easier to see. I'm sorry, give me a second here. So this is another of the alternatives. So rather than show the whole animation here, because I'd love to be here all day showing you animations of concentrations, we created a still shot to compare these alternatives. So what you're seeing here, we took that concentration, calculated the flushing time. So basically, how long does it take for that that constituent to dilute down to 30% of its original concentration? And you can see the hot colors are the longer time, and then the cool colors are shorter time. So these red areas, it's basically showing that at the end of the model, it hadn't reached 30%. So we're greater than 41 days. And then these blue areas, you're showing, about 5 days, which is what we're trying to target. So this was for the existing. This was for the deepened scenario, and then this is a difference plot where you can see where the biggest differences are. And actually what we saw from deepening was interesting, was when you deepen Leggett only, you increase the connection between Blevins and Leggett, which actually hurts the dilution in this area because it doesn't want to pull out as much of those constituents. So what you're seeing here is an increase in flushing times in a lot of areas, and then a decrease in the center part where that's influenced by that main connection between the two channels. So that was an interesting view there. And then, I'm not going to go into every single one, but we did rank them just based on that. We found that in terms of that conveyance, hydraulic conveyance for day-to-day conditions, you saw the new inlet worked best. The culverts also worked really well for that. And then the Leggett widened was not as well, and the deepened not as well. Again, for the same reason, you don't have that connection that can drive that flow out of the ski basin or the canals. So so what we know is that, probably in terms of circulation day to day, probably a combination of alternatives would be better, especially if we're looking at the main problem, which is the velocities and the discharge. It shows us that it's promising. If we do any combinations, then we get more benefit during the day-to-day as well. So so just to move forward, so that's generally where we are at the moment. So I mentioned next steps will be further stakeholder input on these alternatives. So from the county, the navigation district, and the public and city and everybody involved. We're going to continue evaluating alternatives. Like I mentioned, the combination, based on the results we have, we see that there's definitely a benefit for combination. So now we're going to look at it from the eye of, can we afford doing combinations? And what benefit are those going to have for us? Next step, then we'll refine the alternative cost estimates, because obviously we need to evaluate the cost is going to be an important factor. and refine these alternatives as we move forward. Then once we have all that done, we'll select the preferred alternative and then finally develop the design. So once we have an idea of what's the preferred option, then we get into value engineering. Is how do we make that cheaper, and how can we build it and move over to the next step of final design and permitting. So, and that's it for this update. So I'll open it up for any questions for me or Aaron.
All right, this is a presentation to the Commissioners Court, so any questions come from the Commissioners Court only.
I have a question. Does the grant that we're doing this study with allow us to look at ways to manipulate that flow in there where it would also carry out contaminants like things like fertilizer coming down drainage ditches to the bay and other things that might be pollutants or?
Well, as Luis had mentioned, the main goal of this directly coming from the hazard mitigation, trying to reduce that damage from a storm, which is storm surge, and then also the rainfall. So that's the primary goal of whatever alternative we come up with. And, just to be able to develop that and not have any negative impacts. That's why we brought in the circulation part of it. So really that's the only component that we bring in of the circulation, just to make sure that it's not creating a further issue. So that's, in terms of FEMA, that's all we can do for this.
Once you've developed this plan, is it fairly easier if you were to do a study to do with moving out things that are coming into Little Bay? Could you use the data that you've already assimilated to?
Yeah, correct. And that's a great thing about this study, is that it is a good baseline for Little Bay all around and can be used in other studies. Correct. Which
we'll be talking about later on another subject, or with the navigation district in the city of Rockport, Townport. Any other question?
What's your time frame where you can present a proposal to us?
A proposal?
I mean, a solution, proposed solution.
We're looking in the next few months. We've got a pretty tight schedule to come up with the final design for FEMA. What is that? Yeah, December 12th. So it's the end of this year. We have to have final design. So, I mean, that's pretty tight to get all through that and permitting. So, yeah,
We'll be going into public meetings here pretty quick on it to get input. Okay.
Okay. Yep.
Good deal. Looks pretty.
Any other questions? If not, thank you. Appreciate it. And
Thanks.
Thanks for insight.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Luis. To consent items, we have several. 2, 4, 6, 8 consent items. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve the consent items.
I second that.
And seconded, Commissioner Russo. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Unanimous. Item number 1 is discuss, approve, or disapprove a resolution R5. Oh, I make the motion to approve resolution R5 2021, a resolution opposing Senate Bill 10, Senate Bill 234, and House Bill 749, efforts to silence county officials from giving town of Fulton or Austin a hard time about what they're doing up there. In other words, lobbying.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded by Mr. Cheney.
I will speak against this one. I don't see it as a movement to silence us, since we're always free to go to Austin and speak our minds. I think it's a question of whether we can use taxpayer money to lobby in Austin for causes that may be popular with the court, but not necessarily with the taxpayers. So
I've always been in favor of the Texas legislature's movements to limit lobbying.
Motion's been made and seconded.
Of
Roll
course,
call.
on the other hand, to that, Commissioner, a lot of the things that the county or some other entity might lobby against are unfunded mandates that the state would vote on us to make us pay for without input from us. I mean, it's a lot of difference between actually lobbying and each one of us going up there and speaking at a hearing. You pretty well need somebody
A lot of things, yeah.
there day to day to build a relationship with a lot of these legislators, and the things that would come up that some people would see against the citizens are far fewer than the unfunded mandates that they routinely pass the bill on to us without our input.
I think if we only ever used a paid lobbyist with a county taxpayer paid lobbyist to oppose unfunded mandates, we'd probably have the taxpayers of the county solidly at our back. But that we're not limited to that, and that's the problem.
Well, another thing too is if this passes, we won't be able to use the legal representation that we get from TAC as effectively as we do now. I understand there's a lot of things that go on that.
In fact, the dues we pay to TAC will have to be paid from somebody's personal account, not county.
Yeah, we will not be able to.
How much is that? What are the tax dues every year?
How much is the tax dues, do you remember? 1,800.
The concern, though, is that the state also gets to have lobbyists that they pay for with taxpayer funds, and state agencies get to have lobbyists that they pay for with taxpayer funds. So if the state is proposing to do away with county-funded associations, then I think it needs to be across the board and include themselves and their agencies.
And the bad thing about that is that really doesn't give counties across the state of Texas the opportunity to band together to defeat things that are such as unfunded mandates that are negatively impact on counties. And we have seen so many unfunded mandates and other issues that have come down through the legislature that have just made no sense, that without lobbyists to present our position, lobbyists present the position of the commissioner's court or city council or whomever it is that they're working for, we would have no voice up there because, we have 254 counties, and of the 254 counties, they each got 4 commissioners and a judge. And so that's a very small amount of people that can affect what goes on in Austin, whereas a concentrated thing such as TAC or in the city's aspects, TCMA or TML, it's them just telling us what we're going to do without giving us the ability to fight it legally. Because you got a bunch of attorneys up there and people that write these rules and regulations that don't live in Aransas County, or they don't live in Loving County or any place else. And we need to be able to have a combined front to keep the county from just getting everything dumped on them with no say so.
All right, I call roll.
Aye.
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 Nay.
Aye. Or one against. Then that brings up to item number 12. And I also make the motion to approve resolution R7 2021, a resolution in opposition to state unfunded mandates in local government.
I second that.
And seconded by Commissioner Russo.
My main concern about this one is the counties are the local arm of the state, and almost everything we do could be called an unfunded mandate. I mean, we're expected to run the road, keep the roads maintained and run the courts and so forth. We basically do that with ad valorem taxes. I think what we're trying to say is don't add new duties. And to the extent I understand this resolution as a way of saying, just don't come up with new things we're supposed to do. I guess I agree with it. But literally speaking, would undermine everything we do with ad valorem taxes. Because most of those mandates come from the state, not locally.
Some of the, a lot of the sheriff's woes come from unfunded mandates where jail commission and other areas that touch them and just, they come down with stuff that court cost and things like that the local input doesn't have any input to it. We end up having to pay for them. And so I'm very much in favor of this. I'll call for the question.
All right, call for question. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye, unanimous. All right, item 13, do I have a motion?
I move to approve authorizing county judge to sign a letter of support for the Little Bay Restoration Initiative.
Have a
I'll second that.
Second, Commissioner Cheney. Any discussion?
Now, this is no money from the county coffers at this point.
No, no money from the county coffers at this point or anytime in the future, as far as I know.
I don't think I'd ever say that, but
Malcolm.
this is a letter of support for what y'all are trying to get done.
Right, it's a partnership.
Thank you.
In spite of the fine efforts of the county in the past and in the city, Little Bay continues to have some serious problems. Because of that, we have asked Charlie Belair to dissect those problems and come to some conclusions. It is my understanding that with the new Clean Coast Texas that has just been developed by the GLO and also some other funding, that there could be and would be funding available for a program to stop the decline of Little Bay, even to the point where we might be able to see seagrass in Little Bay again, and not that god awful algae that we do see. So there's no funding issue here. We're just asking for a partnership because in reality, GLO will not fund this effort unless we all are in agreement that it needs to be done. So I ask that you do approve this. Thank you.
Okay. Motion made, and seconded. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye, unanimous. Thank you. Discuss approve. Item 14, do I have a motion?
I move to approve order 004-2021 and order prohibiting outdoor burning.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded, Commissioner Casterline. All those in favor?
Well, I have a question about this one. I'm wondering why it needs to be 90 days. It looks to me like we ought to be coming back to reconsider it in some much
And
shorter
it
period.
Also, it says that y'all are giving me permission to lift it when.
Right. I'm talking about it coming back to the Commissioners Court
Pardon?
for us to consider it.
I can't hear.
Let's say it again.
I would prefer to see it come back to us in 30 days than 90 days. I understand that you acting unilaterally can shorten it, but I think that the Commissioners Court should look at it again in a month rather than in 90 days.
Discussion, any other discussion?
Wendy, why don't you just put it back on the agenda?
Well,
I don't want to be in the position of overriding something. It ought to be written into it.
I'm not talking about overriding it, but you can bring it back for updates.
That's what I would be doing.
well, any input from the legal department on this?
Okay, just to clarify, which question are we answering?
She wants to come back in 30 days instead of 90 days. I'm saying that they're also giving me permission to lift the ban.
Yes,
When-
that's what the order says, that you can lift the ban before the end of the 90 days. I understand Ms. Laubach would rather it say 30 days and be up for an extension. Is that what you're asking?
Sure.
Yes, as it is written right now, though, it is for 90 days. So if we do decline to move forward this time, it would have to be reset to another date because what's being ordered, asked to be ordered today is for the full 90 days.
And it's pretty desperate. that
But
we have
under
a return.
the existing order that you've prepared, if a commissioner put it on the agenda in 30 or 40 days to review it, and even though the order reads that, if we put it on the agenda
It could be
to
reviewed
consider
in 30
dropping
days.
it earlier, we can do that?
Absolutely. Say we have a lot of rain, which I don't expect, but we could get a lot of rain in the next 30 or 60 days. We can always bring it back to end it early. If for some reason one of the commissioners thinks that it should end early, but Judge Mills feels otherwise.
Same as when we get notification from the state that the index is right, then we could, the next meeting, we could lift the burn ban, or if you give me permission, I can lift the burn ban.
I just don't think any burn ban should last 90 days. We don't have anything like that amount of foresight. I don't see why a burn ban should ever be more than 30 days.
We can review it in 30 days, but we need to get a burn ban in effect by the commissioner's court today, because we do have a problem out there.
Then it's a shame we didn't give ourselves some options on the agenda. When does the current burn ban expire?
It is.
It's expired already?
Well, it will expire today if you don't.
So we put ourselves in a position where we have to let it expire today or extend it for 90 days, and there's no flexibility.
It's not an extension,
There is flexibility. You just have to put it back on the agenda to
Yeah,
drop it
take it off.
earlier than the 90 days.
Next meeting, you can have another agenda item, say we're going to change that to 30 days, right?
Well, I feel sure the vote's going to go for it. I'm still going to vote against it. I don't think we should ever propose a 90-day ban.
Go.
Call the question.
Commissioner Shea,
Aye.
Commissioner Cashmore,
Aye.
Commissioner Russo,
Aye.
Commissioner Lala,
Nay.
Judge Mills.
All right. All right, item 15.
I move to approve authorizing the issuance of a request for proposal for the medical facilities operator manager.
You're on 15.
Oh, 15, I'm sorry. Okay. I move to approve order 0-05-2021 pursuant to section 254.008 of the Texas Transportation Code for the removal of blockage and drainage ditches located on private property located at Lot H of Goose Island Estates, providing for the required notice to Anthony Schott, the owner of the property, and authorizing the county engineer to remove the blockages at county expense if the owner does not remove them within 20 days.
I second that.
Motion made and second, Commissioner Russo. Any discussion?
We had a considerable discussion about this, but it was all in an executive session. Could we just have a really brief statement from Roads and Bridges about what this is about for the public's benefit?
I do still have that, those maps if you want to see them, Commissioner. Or
If we can make them available to the public if they ask, I
they're
really
always
just need a
available to
quick
the
statement from
public
you.
if they ask. But the situation is the golf course in Lamar has not been a golf course in a number of years. It has not been maintained. The development around the golf course was designed to drain into it. And because of the lack of maintenance, it is not draining in. And I have discussed with Mr. Schott about getting easements, and it's been a little unreasonable. So according to the transportation code, the county can do this, go in and fix the problem on private property if commissioners courts approve it, and that's what we're asking.
Okay.
And the Mud District supports it?
Yes.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call.
Commissioner Cheney,
Aye.
Commissioner Cashmore,
Aye.
Commissioner Russo,
Aye.
Commissioner Lala,
Aye.
Judge Mills.
Aye, unanimous. Thank you. Okay. Item 16.
I move to approve authorizing the issuance of a request for proposal for a medical facility operator / manager. General Land Office contract number 20-065-098 C270 Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery.
I'll second.
Motion made and second, Mr. Castelline. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Well, roll call, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Cheney,
Aye.
Commissioner Castellano,
Aye.
Commissioner Russo,
Aye.
I apologize. I was looking at the court order that's put in front of me to sign. Tell me again what we're moving, what the motion. So before we move to vote, I would have liked to hear some discussion of the changes that have happened to the RFP. The public knows nothing about what's happened in the last week. Yeah, don't we have a presentation? And Ms. Rosette, aren't you here to answer questions? And
Yeah,
I
Kim
would really
Fouts
like to
has prepared,
discuss-
this William, Kim Fouts has prepared, some slides, and we certainly can make a presentation on the changes, but, they are all in line with, the feedback that we got from the commission in the last session. And, we'd be happy to do that if that's, the desire of the court.
That's my desire anyway.
Okay. Presentation then.
Okay, thank you, Judge. This is Kim Fouts. I'm sorry, I had to switch to a phone connection due to unstable connection on my computer. But Colin has the presentation and can operate it for me. So this item was on the agenda last week, March 15th. We are bringing it back because there was a desire for us to make a complete and final changes to that document. And so we'll go to the next slide. We have looked at a number of different sources for updating this and getting the expertise that we need. We have the appointed evaluation committee that we covered last week. We also coordinated with ACMSI. So today we're here to request authorization to proceed with the RFP as it's been presented. There were some questions last week about the timeline. We have set aside 5 weeks for the RFP to be on the street, which should be sufficient time. If additional time is necessary or adjustments need to be made, we'll be coordinating with the evaluation committee for their input on how the market would respond within that time frame. Next slide. Some of the highlights of the changes. The potential uses have stayed the same as presented last week. However, last week we indicated that we wanted to come back to the evaluation committee and have further discussions regarding 2 items. One was the federally qualified health center. We had extensive discussions regarding that. They believe that that particular use would very well serve the community and some of the unmet needs that exist. So that particular proposed use is confirmed in the RFP, as well as last week we received some feedback on the urgent care center. The commissioners had indicated there was some interest in that and making sure that that was clearly delineated in the RFP. We coordinated with the evaluation committee. They agreed with that, and we have updated that. Also, I did want to point out this RFP is ready for issuance with the exception of a couple of things. One is we need to fill in the dates for what that are critical dates and timelines and deadlines, as well as we're still working on the insurance levels and minimum requirements. And what the committee said was they had some ideas about what those numbers needed to be that are different than the original numbers. And we agreed that we would coordinate with our legal staff and to come to some reconciliation on that. Other than that, there are no other changes proposed after today's meeting. Next slide. There were a couple of significant changes that I wanted to point out that were real adds that the committee had. The first being is we had asked for licenses and certifications. We added that accreditations needed to be part of that baseline. We had a requirement already for Medicaid and Medicare. Another critical change is that the proposer had to be willing and able to secure transfer agreements with large acute care hospitals as well as freestanding ERs. And then we also added provisions requiring that all major plans, health plans, be accepted, and that would apply to subcontractors and vendors. Next
Yeah,
slide.
before you move off this page, could you talk a little bit about the legal requirements for having some association with an ER if we're going to establish a hospital, and how that might be addressed, given that we already have an ER?
Right. If a hospital came in place, and it depends on what kind of hospital it is, but assuming it's a traditional hospital or micro hospital, it is required by state law to have an ER associated with that hospital. And so there would have to be some dialogue potentially with the existing ER on site to see if some agreements could be made relationship-wise in order to accomplish the ER requirement for that particular type use. Also, I would suggest for further information on that, we do have some committee members here that could talk about that in more detail. Next slide. We also moved some information around that had been in the first draft, but we felt like the timing of it needed to be further up in the process. So the committee had suggested that there be a 2-year forecast of payer mix and patient mix data. So we moved that into the initial round of data that we requested of proposers. We also moved the total subsidies requirement and information to the first round, as well as if it's a hospital, that they specify the revenue dollars per inpatient bed per day. And all of that would come in the first round. The committee believes that these components are really important for the evaluation so that they can determine the viability of the use that's proposed. Next slide. We also did a little bit of wordsmithing on the evaluation criteria. You can see I've redlined that there on the screen, and it just clarifies some of the information that we originally proposed, but it also added diversity and clarified diversity of patient populations to be served, regardless of socioeconomic status. Next slide.
Previous
Yes,
slide. And just explain what payer mix and patient mix data. What is that? 2-year forecast mix and
so we're getting into some of the technical questions. So if we could hold on that and have our technical experts come in, we have several committee members as well as Patricia Arnold from ACMSI, and I think they're better suited to answer that question.
All right, thank you.
On this page, I see care has been crossed out before hospital. Talk to us for a minute about the difference between a garden variety hospital and an acute care hospital.
So the micro hospital still fits under that category, but what this does is opens it up to a variety of hospitals and lets us have the full menu of all the options that might be available. And so what they were just saying is that we basically needed to not be as specific and allow for the market to look at it for the various options of hospital types.
What's an example of a hospital?
One would be like it could be a micro hospital. It could be like a mental health hospital. And so they're various types. I'm not familiar with the others, but I think the committee can further answer that as well.
Right.
Okay.
And last slide. we'll open it up for questions. I wanted to turn it over to Commissioner Russo. She is the County Evaluation Committee representative. Also present, we have a number of people present. As I indicated, Patricia Arnold with ACMSI is here. We have other evaluation committee reps, Jennifer Reset and Matt Brewington, I believe, are there in person, as well as Nancy Kinkler is available via Zoom.
Thank you, Kim. I would ask Jennifer if you would like to come to the mic and address a couple of the questions I think Commissioner Laubach and Cheney had, and then Matt, I'm assuming that you have not seen you before without a mask or with a mask, and then follow up with Patricia and we'll hear what their comments might be. Thank you. Introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Jennifer Reset. I'm a resident of Rockport, former hospital CEO and medical practice executive.
I'd love to hear just generally your views on what's changed and improved over the last week. But the two issues we specifically brought up were what's with the payer and patient mix, and it helped me understand better what's going on with the hospital versus an ER, what kind of hospital might or might not qualify.
Sure. The things that we tried to hone in on were the specific requirements without going out to the market and telling potential operators what specific type of facility we are inviting them to propose. We tried to lay out some stipulations that would arrive at proposals for a facility that is best suited to the needs of the community and the county. And that encompasses a variety of different metrics, not the least of which is financial. In terms of the different types of hospitals, in Texas, a hospital license is a hospital license. And in order to be categorized as a hospital, you have to have certain things on your hospital campus or in your physical plant. One of those is an emergency department. It cannot be remote. And if you look at the relationship between the current standalone ER, that is corporately related to a hospital campus in Corpus Christi, but on that hospital campus, there is an emergency department in that acute care hospital. This is an extension of that. It's not permissible to have a hospital facility and say, oh, over there across town, that's our ER. That I don't think will fly with the State Department of Health Services, which is in charge of licensing and accreditation of hospitals in the state of Texas.
But if we receive a hospital proposal that we like, it need not have its own ER that can work out something with the existing ER. Is that correct?
No, they would need to have an ER on the site of the hospital. And
their own duplicative ER.
It would be a duplication, and there would have to be that would be the elephant in the room with HCA, which has come to the aid of the county in arranging and agreeing with ACMSI to have a standalone facility here, which meets the current requirements. I don't know at this point in time whether having two ERs would be feasible. I don't know if the county can support two of those. So that would have to be a discussion that would be had if the county decides, one, if there's a proposal that comes forth that proposes some sort of acute care hospital, and then if that is something that the county seriously considers, there would have to be some kind of discussion as to how that works with the current menu of services that are available here, because there would be duplication.
This one of the changes that I see in the RFP redraft for the finalization for today is adding a line to the rating system that gives an extra set of points just because what you're proposing is in some sense a hospital. It sounds like we're pushing the hospital approach, but we don't know how we're going to solve the ER problem.
Right. That was in the RFP from the beginning, and that was not changed. I don't know if that is there To be very frank with you, for the benefit of the GLO, I don't really know. We did not have much discussion about those bonus points. There were some things that were changed up in other areas that were specifically geared towards meeting the requirements of the county. And one of those things dealt with, I think we word crafted it, as Kim said, diversity of patient populations served. And so that implies a collection of medical services of some sort, inpatient or outpatient or some combination thereof, that would meet the currently unmet needs of a wide swath of our county residents.
Is that the same topic as what Commissioner Cheney was asking about, the payer mix and patient mix? Or is that something
It relates to it. What I just mentioned, that is more of a clinical or appropriateness metric. If you have people that have primary care needs or obstetrics needs or elder care needs, that is more of an attempt to match a service with a need, not so much looking at the financial and the reimbursement part of it. The payer mix and the patient mix is something in the healthcare industry we refer to as breaking down the demographic pieces of the reimbursement pie: Medicare, Medicaid, CHIP, self-pay, commercial, private insurance, et cetera. That's what your payer mix is. And there tends to be a pretty close correlation between demographics and payer mix.
So the reason you ask for that kind of thing is what, mainly to be able to judge feasibility, or is it more broadly useful to you?
Feasibility. I looked at the A&M, and I'm sure other members of our committee have done the very same thing, being healthcare executives. It's what we do. Looked at the A&M study, and a couple of things I pulled out from that were the recommended number of beds if a facility was placed here that would be licensed as an inpatient hospital. They had a range of 6 to 8 beds, and then they estimated that the annual budget would be between 10 and 12 million dollars. That's your operating budget. That's not your capital maintenance and repairs budget. And when you look at the number of beds, if your hospital was at an average, what we call census or capacity over a year's time at 50%, you would need to bring in the door, not with an esoteric fee schedule that nobody pays, but actual dollars in the door, $8,600 per day per bed. That's a huge hill to climb. So if there is a hospital operator out there that thinks they can make a facility work with that steep a hill to climb and arrange a collection of inpatient services of sufficient worth and complexity to be able to collect that level of dollars per bed per day, then we need to know how they would do that and what kind of backup in the way of reimbursement or fail-safes they would expect from the county to make up the difference between what they would incur in expenses versus what they could actually command in terms of fees collected from actual patient care.
So I gather there's a few statements added in the revised RFP that speak generally to the issue of a taxing district and disclaim any intention of creating one. Is that something you guys are talking about and considering?
Yes, one of the things, if you look at the rating criteria, that's one of the things that we would look at is how heavily would any operator expect to rely upon the county to make up any shortfalls. That for us would be problematic. Because I don't think that the 1.2 million would be sufficient when we're looking at these kinds of numbers.
By 1.2 million, the indigent care,
proposed indigent care. I think an operator may be looking for a number larger than that. I don't know how much larger. That's why it will be interesting to see what types of proposals we receive and why we ask for them to show what their anticipated payer mix would be and how they make the bottom line, basically, without relying on the county to make up the difference, because that very quickly gets you into a situation where you're looking at a taxing district.
But Jennifer, I would also state that we were not interested in having a taxing district.
Correct. The committee was, I think,
make
was
that
pretty
clear.
unanimous in saying that's not a road we think would be in the best interest of Aransas County anytime soon.
Do you think, with what you know of the community and what we're trying to do, do you think we're going to get very many looks at this, other than maybe the organization that is with 24/7 ER now?
It'll be interesting to see. I would be very surprised if we get any or even a couple hospital proposals, because the operators of those types of facilities run these metrics all the time. That's the first thing they're going to look at. They'll look at the demographics for this area. They'll run the kind of numbers I did just, very quickly. And they're going to know pretty quickly whether it's feasible or infeasible. I do think that the proposals that we get are probably going to be other levels of care. And one of the things that we talked about in the committee is that the federally qualified health clinic would be a very valuable thing, and it would meet a lot of needs here. But we discussed that type of facility and the process you have to go in order to obtain one of those or build one of those or get funding and support for those doesn't fit within the requirements of the GLO grant that we're looking at. So that would be a separate endeavor outside of this. But there are several other levels of care that would probably work well.
And that brings up just another real quick question. Can this court get a copy of the demographics that y'all are presenting out there, so we kind of get an idea that we're all talking about the same thing as far as need?
We have asked if of Kim and William if there are more current demographics than what we received in the A&M study, which I believe you all have received previously. If there is anything post Harvey available, would be very helpful. And
yeah, we're working on that, and if we get it available, for the committee, we'll share it with everybody that's interested. It's no problem.
Okay. If you don't get it available for the committee, how can it be judged?
Matt, can you help us out here?
Yeah, Matt Brewington, and the two things on the demographics, that's going to depend upon the operator. The payer mix is their payer mix based off of the services they're going to provide. And that's why acute care hospital in the study that was done, that was based off of bringing a hospital and what kind of patients are going to come into that hospital and how much each different type of patient, how much money they're going to bring into the facility. The difference, and that's kind of what we brought up, the difference in the payer mix and patient mix. You may see, let's say 50% of your revenue may come from insured patients, but when you're an ER and your actual number of patients you see, 50% of them may be self-pay, but you collect such little from self-pay patients that your patient mix and your payer mix are different.
Okay.
So that's kind of wanted to see the difference of the type of patients you see, and they care about the revenue side and which ones are going to bring in the most money and what that mix will look like.
It sounds to me like once you get in, see who's interested in doing this, we may come back and just see how we can tweak it and move it so that it fits at least somebody out there to where we can get some extended medical services. Right. It looks like right now, there's nothing really set in stone except what we're asking. And
I think that's the goal, is to stay as broad as we can.
Yeah,
we're throwing this out there. And when you say, do we think we're going to meet people? Hopefully we've made it so broad that we'll get ideas no one in this room's thought of yet.
Exactly.
As that could help support the community.
That was the idea.
And I should clarify, when I said that I thought we might get one or two, that's probably relating to something with a hospital license. I think probably the majority of the responses we would receive will probably involve other levels of care than a hospital.
We're not going to go back to a doc in a box, are we?
That's up to, that's not up to us. We're gonna help you as much as we can, but at this point, it would be very difficult to speculate. I would. be
Thank you,
hesitant to do that.
Jennifer.
You're welcome.
Patricia, did you have something that you would like to add to this, please?
If you have any further questions, I can answer any further questions that you might have, but I really appreciate the RFP committee. I think that they've thought of a lot of different aspects, and I think that they've done a really good job. But if you have any other questions for ACMSI, I can answer those for you. Thank you guys for your presentation.
Done a great job. Really appreciate it. Thank you. There's no further discussion. I'll have a roll call. We do have a motion.
Continue or start over?
No, wait, start over.
Commissioner Cheney,
Aye.
Commissioner Castro,
Aye.
Commissioner Russo,
Aye.
Commissioner Lava,
Aye.
Judge Mills.
Aye, unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you all.
Item number 17.
I move to approve the master agreement for mutual aid by and between the Coastal Bend Council of Governments in Aransas County.
Second, Commissioner Castleline. Any discussion?
We started to talk about this a little last week, and one of the concerns was we're not really quite sure what it would cost us, but I'll ask legal counsel to confirm. It looks to me like we always have a choice. If we go into a disaster and some neighboring county asks us to come help with something that's incredibly expensive, we can always say no. And we're not going to find ourselves bound to do something which is not in budget.
That's right.
That being the case, I don't have any
Roll call.
further concerns.
Commissioner Cheney,
Aye.
Commissioner Castro,
Aye.
Commissioner Russo,
Aye.
Commissioner Lava,
Aye.
Judge Mills.
Aye, unanimous. Item 18.
I move to approve authorizing judge to sign resolution R06-2021, a resolution for Homeland Security Grant Program, grant number 3171806.
I'll second this one, but could somebody just tell us really quick what it is? How big is it? Is it an annual? Is it renewing?
It is an annual. We receive funding from the Homeland Security for stone garden purposes for our SO patrol.
So is this entirely Stone Garden or?
It is entirely. Stone
Okay, got it.
Any other discussion? Roll call.
Commissioner Cheney,
Aye.
Commissioner Castro,
Aye.
Commissioner Russo,
Aye.
Commissioner Lava,
Aye.
Judge Mills.
Aye, unanimous. Item 18, approve February 20, yeah.
19,
Item
yeah.
19, approve February 2021 tax treasurer's report, I'm sorry. I make that motion.
I second it.
Second, Commissioner Russo. All those in favor? Oh, any discussion? Any discussion? No discussion, roll call.
Commissioner Cheney,
Aye.
Commissioner Castro,
Aye.
Commissioner Russo,
Aye.
Commissioner Lava,
Aye.
Judge Mills.
Aye, unanimous.
Item 20.
Have a motion on item 20.
I move to approve a refund request and an application for tax refund of overpayment in the amount of $2,692.28 for Rockin' Riviera One Limited due to overpayment of 2020 property taxes.
Second.
Motion made. Castleline.
I have a question.
Question.
When I look at this and the attached tax bill, it shows that the amount paid was paid in February. So the amount they were paying, so where it says date of tax payment 2/2/2021 isn't
Code
correct.
states that January 31st fell on Sunday. So February 1st is technically January pay. He made February payment, but I still have to honor the January pay.
All right, thank you.
So what, both of these, are they did somebody accidentally double pay or?
Yes, he basically went online to pay his taxes in February and didn't change the amount because the online system was calculating February pay. But we have to honor January pay on February 1st.
Okay.
Do we have a lot of these? It seems like we've had more than normal come up for
Normally,
refund.
no. Normally with the credit card ones are hard to not do it this way. Normally, if they're mailed to us and we have timely manner, we can send the check back
and have them fix it instead of tying up the funds. But with the last one, it was real close to the 31st. There wouldn't be enough time to get that check back. This one being online, there's no way to do that.
Motion made, second. Further discussion. Roll call.
Commissioner Cheney,
Aye.
Commissioner Castleline.
Aye.
Commissioner Russo,
Aye.
Commissioner Blah,
Aye.
Judge Mills.
Aye. Unanimous. Item 21.
I move to approve a, go ahead.
Go ahead, go ahead.
I move to approve a refund request in an application for tax refund of overpayment in the amount of $2,931.92 for Mojave Limited due to overpayment of 2020 property taxes.
Second.
Motion made and second, Commissioner Castleline.
And this was the same person, just different
Aye.
business.
Commissioner Castleline.
Aye.
Commissioner Russo,
Aye.
Commissioner Blah,
Aye.
Judge Mills.
Aye, unanimous. Item number 22.
Move to approve.
Motion made,
I'll second it.
second, Commissioner Cheney. Any discussion? We know the answer to that.
Yes, sir. There are none.
Roll call.
Commissioner Cheney,
Aye.
Commissioner Castleline.
Aye.
Commissioner Russo,
Aye.
Commissioner Blah,
Aye.
Judge Mills.
Aye, unanimous. Item 23.
I move to approve accounts payable and payroll liabilities.
Second.
Motion made, second, Commissioner Castleline.
And are there any unusual ones, just normal?
No, ma'am, there are no unusual ones for this time.
Roll call.
Commissioner Cheney,
Aye.
Commissioner Castleline.
Aye.
Commissioner Russo,
Aye.
Commissioner Blah,
Aye.
Judge Mills.
Aye, unanimous. And we now open it up to any department head, elected official would like to bring something up to. And there's no one that wants to jump up to the mic. Okay. That being said, we have nothing to go into closed session about, so do I have a motion?
I move to adjourn.
Motion made, second, Commissioner Castleline. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye. Mike?